Welcome, everyone. We are continuing our Mysteries of Creation mini-series as part of the larger series of fundamentals of Kabbalah and Chassidut. For those who were here last week and those who weren't, we began last week delving into the Sefer Yetzirah, considered the oldest of all Kabbalistic texts, and extremely influential on all subsequent Kabbalistic thought. A relatively short text, but just everything in it is full of significance and meaning and symbolism. So there are 6 chapters. Last week we went through the first 4. And again, it's just an overview. It was not an attempt to delve into the depths of each and every part of Sefer Yetzirah. Yes, I have to say, Nachum just shared that along with the Alter Rebbe getting out of jail on this day, as discussed before we started recording, it's also the Maggid of Mezrich's Yortzeit. And Maggid was the Alter Rebbe's Rebbe. So it's very significant that his Yortzeit and the day that the Alter Rebbe was freed, and in a sense, Hasidic thought was given a kind of like a new lease on life, happened on the same day. That's what we are celebrating on this day. So tonight we're going to do the 5th and 6th chapters and try to sum up this series. And before we do that, though, I want to go back to the first chapter. So I realized that there were 4 different Mishnahs that had very, very important information that we didn't have a chance to get to the first time. So we're going to begin with the 4th Mishnah in the first chapter. Just as a quick review, the 6 chapters, the first chapter is about the 10 Sfirot. The second chapter introduces the 22 Hebrew letters, which divides the 22 Hebrew letters into 3 groupings: 3 mother letters, 7 double letters, and 12 simple letters. For those who want to, of course, on our website, on YouTube, on the WhatsApp, on Telegram, you can go back and see previous classes. But the letters are divided into 3, 7, and 12. So the 3rd chapter was about the 3 letters, Aleph, Mem, and Shin, and how they manifest in the world, in space, time, and consciousness. The 4th chapter was about the 7 letters, the 7 double letters. The 7 double letters are those letters that can be pronounced in 2 different ways. And tonight, in the 5th chapter, it begins the 12 simple letters. And then the 6th chapter is in a sense, a review and compilation of everything that came before it. As I said, I'm going back to 4 different Mishnahs in the first chapter. I will read in Hebrew and then translate. Eser Sfirot Belima, 10 Sfirot of nothingness. Here, nothing doesn't mean nothing. It's actually the nothing that contains everything. It's just called belima, without essence that you can touch, but it affects everything. Eser v'lo tesha, eser v'lo achadesrei. 10 and not 9, 10 and not 11. Without delving deeply into this, the Sefer Yetzirah wanted to make it very, very clear that the number 10 is such a cardinal, symbolic, significant number that the Sfirot are always spoken about as 10 Sfirot, even though that there's in a sense, an 11th Sfira, which is Dat. But when we count Keter, we don't count Dat. When we count Dat, we don't count Keter, to maintain the system of 10. The system of 10 has to do with creation, the 10 expressions with which God created the world through the 10 Sfirot. And then the number 10 appears again in the 10 tests of Avram, in the 10 plagues in Egypt, in the 10 commandments, in the 10 nations that Avram was promised, and many other important 10s in Jewish tradition. Now, this is the part I wanted to get to. It says, Haven b'chachma, understand with wisdom, b'chacham b'bina, and be wise in understanding. B'chon behem, b'chakor mehem, to examine with them and probe with them. V'omed devar al borav, and make each thing stand on its essence. V'ashev yotzer al mechono, and have the Creator sit on his foundation, on his base. The part that I want to mention is a concept that, for those who have been following our different series, there's a word that we've used over and over and again, a critical word in understanding the Torah called interinclusion, where one thing is included in another. The classic example is when we count Sfira to Omer, and each day of the Omer, we combine 2 Sfirot together. And so the whole first week of Sfira to Omer is the week of Chesed, but we have all 7 of the lower Sfirot included, interincluded. Chesed sheba chesed, gevura sheba chesed, teferet sheba chesed, and onwards. But here, this is one of the most ancient sources for this concept, very simply, where it says, understand with wisdom and be wise with understanding, because 2 of the higher Sfirot is Chachma, wisdom, and Bina, understanding. And so here is a classic, maybe the first example of this concept called interinclusion. In other words, wisdom has to be interincluded in understanding, and understanding has to be interincluded with wisdom. Now, without being able to go into it now, but each of these Sfirot have a whole nature to them, a whole dynamic, a whole state of consciousness. And so it's not just like in English, wisdom. There's so much that goes along with the Hebrew word chachma and with the Hebrew word bina. But here is perhaps the oldest source of this concept of interinclusion, that everything is included in everything else. This is such an important concept. I just wanted to point out that here it is in the Sefer Yetzirah, going all the ways back. Now, the next one we're going to do is the 6th Mishnah in the first chapter. Eser Sfirot Belima. Again, 10 Sfirot of nothingness. Sophia Tan Kamare Habazak. And their vision is like the appearance of lightning. V'tachlitan ein lehem kates, and their limit has no end. V'dibro behen v'ratzo v'shov, and his word, God's word, is in them, and they run and return. Ula mima'amaro kisufa Yordofu v'lifnei kiso hem mishtachavim. And they rush as a result of God's speech like a whirlwind. And before his throne, they prostrate themselves. Now, this has very, very deep meaning as to what the Sfirot are all about. But here, I want to point out that the term Ratzo V'Shov. Again, for those, and many of you are among them, who have shared so much of our learning, this is another term that we mention all the time, called running and returning. And here, later, because the source of Sefer Yetzirah is way before the prophet Ezekiel, and part of Ezekiel's vision, the first chapter of Ezekiel, he sees angels running and returning. Running and returning. And this is considered the basic dynamic of all life. The pulse of life, our breath, our heartbeat, our blood pulsing, the tides coming and going, AC, DC, electricity, all the opposites and their dynamic connections. It all falls under this concept called running and returning. And so here, the Sefer Yetzirah explains that the Sfirot, they're dynamic. That's the point here. They're not static. They're in a constant state of dynamism, of movement. And God's word is coming through them because it's through the 10 Sfirot that God creates and maintains his world, the 10 Sfirot and the 22 letters. These are the channels through which God is creating and maintaining the world. And life is dynamic. It's full of energy and movement. And so here, the Sefer Yetzirah, but it's using this concept of running and returning. And that their vision is of like lightning bolts, like flashes of insight. So that's another ancient source for this concept. The next one is the seventh one in the first chapter. Eser Sfirot Belima. They all start the same. 10 Sfirot of nothingness. And what I'm going to read now is a very, very famous theme or expression. Na'ut sofan b'techilatan b'techilatan b'sofan. Their end is wedged in their beginning, and their beginning in their end. So this is, in a sense, a further manifestation of this idea of interinclusion. Their beginning is included in their end, and their end in their beginning. Especially the highest sphere of Keter and the lowest of Malchut. So one might think, well, what's the connection? Keter is way up here, and Malchut is way down here. But just the meaning of the words, Keter means crown, and Malchut means kingship. Well, who wears the crown? The king. So the Keter and the Malchut, the beginning is wedged in the end, and the end in the beginning. So this, in a sense, ties all of the Sfirot together. Of course, there's a lot more to say about all of this, but I'm just trying to point out these classic, important, foundational ideas, all being introduced in the Sefer Yetzirah. When we first began, I explained how influential this book is, and it's really had an effect on all subsequent teachings of Kabbalah and Chassidut. Now, the last one is is really an important one. And that's the 8th one. It says like this: Eser Sfirot Belima, 10 Sfirot of nothingness. Belom Picha Miledaber, close your mouth from speaking. Belibcha Milaharher, and your heart from thinking. Ve'im ratz picha ledaber, belibcha laharher. But if your mouth runs to speak, or your heart to think or murmur, shuv lemakom, return to the place. Shalachach ne'amar, and here's a quote from Yecheskel. So this is, in a sense, proof that Sefer Yetzirah was only edited much later. As we'll see at the end here, the initial source of Sefer Yetzirah is attributed to Avram Avinu, who comes obviously way before the prophet Ezekiel. But here it's quoting Ezekiel because it fits in perfectly to the wisdom that was already handed down. And that is that, again, he saw these living beings running and returning. And regarding this, a covenant was made. Now, You Kaplan, and for those who are not aware, we've shown this before, this is the major book that we're learning. This is You Kaplan's explanation of Sefer Yetzirah. He says in a really very, very important thing. He says that there is a way to read the entire Sefer Yetzirah as a directional, an instruction book for meditation. And this one in particular, because if you just listen to just a simple understanding, it says you should close your mouth from speaking and your heart from thinking. So here, obviously, we usually think of our mind as thinking, but the emotions also are churning all the time. And so to be able to meditate properly, not only do we have to quiet the mind, we have to quiet our emotions, which are feeding a lot of our thought process. So here it says, you have to quiet your mouth and you have to quiet your heart. But if you lose concentration, you lose focus, and you start falling out of a meditative state, it says, Shuv lemakom, return to your place. And so Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan explains not only this Mishnah, but he reads the entire book as a manual, an instruction book for meditation. How to meditate on the Sfirot, how to meditate on the letters, how to meditate in general. Now, this is a very, very important way of reading this book, is because if anyone, and I think some of you were with us on Sunday night, we talked about Jewish meditation, because in this week's parsha it says, V'yeshev Yaakov, me'eretz megurei aviv, that Yaakov sat in the dwelling place of his father. And the sitting was sitting in meditation. And the dwelling place of his father can also be read in the awe of the teachings of his father, who taught him how to meditate. And who taught Yitzchak? Avram taught Yitzchak how to meditate. And so this entire book of Sefer Yetzirah can be seen as an instructional for specific Jewish meditation, more than just a kind of a general type of meditation that many people are familiar with. But here, the Sefer Yetzirah, in a sense, is a classic example of how to meditate and use the energy of the Sfirot as a meditative tool and the Hebrew letters. So those are the 4 Mishnahs I wanted to return to in chapter 1. Each one of them is so important. And for those who were here last week and this week, I hope everyone is getting a sense of how foundational Sefer Yetzirah is for all Jewish thought. Now we're going to go to the 5th chapter, and this is going to discuss the 12 simple letters. Remember, we already did the 3 mother letters, the Aleph, Mem, and Shin. And those were fire, water, and air. And then we had the 7 double letters. These were the letters that could be pronounced in 2 ways: Bet, Gimel, Daled, Chaf, Pei, Resh, and Tav. And now we're going to do the 12 simple letters. And the whole 5th chapter is about these 12 letters and how they manifest in Olam, Shana, and Nefesh, the 3 types of dimension, the 3 dimensions of space, the dimension of time, and the dimension of Nefesh, which is soul connected to body and consciousness. So we begin like this. Shtei Esrei Pshutot. There are 12 simple letters. Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet, Yud, Lamed, Nun, Samach, Ayin, Tzadi, Kuf. In other words, any letter that's not one of the 3 mother letters or the 7 double letters are all called the 7 simple letters. Yisodon, Chakakan, Chatzvan, Sarfan, Shaklan, Bahamiran. V'tsar behem. He engraved them. God engraved them. With these letters, he carved, he engraved with them, he permuted with them, he weighed them and transformed them. And with them, he formed 12, Shneim Asar Mazalot, 12 constellations. Ba'olam. In the world, remember, all of Sefer Yetzirah is based on this idea of space, time, and consciousness. In Hebrew, Olam, Shana, and Nefesh. So with these 12 letters, he created 12 constellations in space. Shnei Asar Chadashim B'Shana, 12 months of the year. Shnei Asar Manhigim B'Nefesh Zachar V'Nekeva, and 12 directors in the level of souls, masculine and feminine. We discussed already the importance that this concept of masculine and feminine is repeated throughout Sefer Yetzirah, because these are the 2 opposite energies in the world that manifest much more than just in male and female bodies. We're talking about energies that pervade all of reality, masculine and feminine. So here we see we have 12 constellations, we have 12 months, and we have 12, we're going to learn they're called senses, chushim, in the body. So it goes on, just to save time here, the next Mishnah, it goes through all the names of the different constellations. These are the same constellations that are known in astrology in the world. In Hebrew, there are specific names for them that are different, but they're based on the same idea of the English names, such as Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. 12 constellations. All of astrology is based on these 12 constellations, and they have a significance in Jewish thought as well. But each one of them have their Hebrew names. And then it explains, then it goes through the names of the months. But the important thing is that each constellation, in a sense, is created through a letter. Now, this is very significant. We're not, in other words, the Sefer Yetzirah is not saying there are 12 constellations, and we choose to parallel the 12 simple letters to them. The language is much different. It's with these letters, God created the 12 constellations. With these letters, he created the 12 months. And with these letters, he created the 12 senses of the soul. So the Sefer Yetzirah goes through the names of the Hebrew months. And in order, starting with the month of spring, is Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, Av, Elul, Tishrei, Cheshvan, Kislev, our month, Tevet, Shvat, and Adar. So again, we have Olam, Shana, Nefesh, 12 constellations, 12 months. And now we're going to learn, they're now 12 parts of the body. This is the Nefesh. And they are the 2 hands, the 2 feet, the 2 kidneys, the gallbladder, the intestines, the liver, the stomach, another part of the digestional system, and the spleen. What I didn't read, and I'm going to go back, is, one second. Right. I'm going to go back because I skipped over the names of the 12 senses. And this is very, very, very important. And that is that these 12 letters, each of the letters creates a sense in the soul. Now, we usually think of 5 senses, the 5 physical senses of touch and smell and sight and hearing and taste. But in Sefer Yetzirah, there's 7 more. And they are, and they're connected to the months. You're going to see in 1 minute, we're going to look at the chart that is the first thing in the chat. It was sent to everyone on WhatsApp, and it's in the first thing in the chat for people to refer to. And so the names of the 12 senses. 1 second. Are Sicha, speech, Hirhur, thought, Hiluch, which means motion or progress, Riyah, sight, Shmiya, hearing, Ma'aseh is action, Tashmish is intimate relations, Reach is smell, Shena is sleep or dreaming. Rogez is, we'll call it righteous anger. Le'ita is taste. And schok is laughter. These are the 12. So what I'd like everyone to do, hopefully you have it again. This is what we're going to be looking at. Everyone should have it in the chats, the link to open this up, and in your WhatsApp. Now, the reason we're not doing sharing is that we found in this system with this host. When we share something, it interferes with our being able to save the recording. We don't know why that is, but it's happened a number of times. But everyone should have it. And again, we're just doing a quick overview. I've actually thought that we quite literally could do a whole series on this. I have done a whole series. I did actually a whole year series on this chart and this chart alone, even though there's a couple, there'd be a couple more columns here. But the premise here, and again, I'm assuming that most of you are actually looking at this now, is that every Hebrew, Amy, yes, there is a link to the charts in the chats. Someone maybe will post it again. And as I explained, because of the big Yud Tet Kislev event, I really am limited in time tonight. So we're just going to introduce this chart, and I'll say B'li Neder, we will go into it much deeper. But what's so important about this is that every month in the Hebrew calendar has a series of associations that are the keys to understanding the energy of the month. Why is this so important? Because our calendar is a lunar calendar. And so a solar calendar, just from experience, in other words, the difference between January and February and March, other than you might have Washington's birthday or Lincoln's birthday or Valentine's Day, or even if it's religious holidays, there's not a sense of the month. Okay, January, February, March, everyone relates to the winter. But what we're trying to explain here is in the Hebrew calendar, every month has a whole different energy. And there are many months that are part of summer or winter, but each one in the lunar calendar has its own energy. And that energy comes from the letter that is the actual creative channel through which the month is created. The sense, we just went through the senses, and hopefully everyone can look at them. The astrological sign, the name of the Hebrew month. Later, the 12 tribes, which of course are obviously connected to the 12 simple letters in the 12 months, are added here. We added the elements that when you go through the signs of the zodiac and the months, it goes fire, earth, air, water, and then it repeats itself 3 times. So the first month of the year, Nisan, is a fire sign. And the next one, Iyar, is an earth sign. And Sivan is an air sign. And Tammuz is a water sign. And this has significance also. The tribe that is connected to the month has tremendous significance. Now, some of the columns that are not here include that for each month, there's a permutation of the 4-letter name of God. Now, usually when you have 4 letters in a word, you can permute them 24 ways. But because in God's name, the Hey is repeated, so you only can make 12 combinations. And each month has a combination of God's name. This has tremendous significance to understand the energy of the month. The 12 simple letters, as we explained last week, when we look at a chart of the 10 Sfirot, we see that there are 22 lines connecting the 10 Sfirot. And we learned that there were 3 horizontal lines which connect Chachma and Bina, Chesed and Gevura, and Netzach and Hod. And these 3 horizontal lines are, in a sense, created by the 3 mother letters. And then we learned that there are 7 perpendicular lines connecting, for example, Chachma to Chesed, and Chesed to Netzach. There's 7 of them. Those connect to the 7 double letters. And then there's 12 perpendicular lines, and these are the 12 simple letters. So each month, there is a connection between 2 Sfirot. So that's almost like counting Sfirat Omer, where we say today is the aspect of whatever it is, Teferet Sheba Gevura, Yesod Sheba Malchut, Netzach Sheba Chesed. So also in the months, but it's the whole month, has a connection between 2 of the Sfirot. And another column that does not appear here is which part of the body. We just read the 12 parts of the body that the Sefer Yetzirah mentions. So in general, because our idea here is just to introduce this idea of the 12 simple letters and how they manifest in the 12 constellations, the 12 months, and the 12 senses, and the 12 body parts that are connected. So we will be going through this at some point, I still have to decide when, in a much deeper way, because this is so fundamental, because we're always in time. We're always in one month or another. And if you don't know the energy of the month, then you can't connect to it. So by learning these, I call them keys. They're keys to unlocking the energy of the month. Once you understand what the tribe of the month is, and you know about the tribe, there's an energy to each tribe. When we know about which letter, when we know about which combination of God's name, which sense, maybe the most important of all of them, what is the sense of that month? And then many people do this on Rosh Chodesh, is look at all of the energies of the month and begin to connect to them right from the beginning. And it's an amazing thing. We know, and I'll mention because it's Yud Tet B'Kislev, and one of the Alter Rebbe's primary teaching is what's called living with the times, that we have to connect ourselves to the Torah portion of the week and whatever the month is and whatever the nearest holiday is. And when you do that, you're connecting to the energy that's invested in that time period that we're in. Now, if you don't know what holiday is coming and you don't know what energy the month is, and it's like, then January is like February and February is like March. June is like July and July is like August. It's just summer, it's hot. What's the difference between June, July, and August? But here, and the source is, that's why we've been learning Sefer Yetzirah as part of Mysteries of Creation, because it's through these letters that everything in space, time, and consciousness, and soul, and body are created. That's the premise of the book. It's the premise of all Jewish mysticism, is this idea of Olam, Shana, and Nefesh. of worlds and time, space, time, and consciousness. So now, even though we're limited in time, I do want to finish our overview of Sefer Yetzirah. So we're going to go through the 6th chapter very, very quickly. And like I said, most of it is simply a review of everything that's come before with different interinclusions. It's kind of a summary, but obviously it has new points also. So I want to just jump to the 4th Mishnah of the 6th chapter. And again, because I've been trying to pick out the innovative ideas that have permeated all of Jewish thought from the time of Sefer Yetzirah. So it says like this, Gam et ze lumat ze asa Elokim. This is actually a verse from Ecclesiastes, from Kohelet. But again, this is just showing that it was edited much, much later, and we've attributed it to Rabbi Akiva. This is what I learned from Rav Ginsburg, as he teaches that the Sefer Yetzirah received its editing after quite literally approximately 1,700 years of oral tradition. Just like the Mishnah was written down in that time, so then the Sefer Yetzirah was also, in a sense, codified. So it says, this, opposite this did God make. So here's this idea of the importance of opposites. We learned already, run and return, the energy, male and female. And so there's a verse that expresses that. Gam ze lu'umat ze asa Elokim. Tov lu'umat ra, good opposite evil. Ra lu'umat tov, an evil opposite of good. Tov mi tov, ra mi ra. Good from good, evil from evil. Hatov mavchin et ra. The good defines evil. The hara mavchin et tov. And evil defines good. Tova shmura letovim. And goodness guards those who are good. V'ra shmura l'ra'im. And evil is kept or is guarded for those who are evil. Now this has so much deep understanding here. And again, we have the interinclusion. Here, it's all focused on good and evil. There's good from good, there's evil from evil. There's good that defines evil, there's evil that defines good. There's good that's the opposite of evil, and there's evil that's the opposite of good. And there are all of these possibilities, and this is reality. This is life, is just a combination of all of these different energies. Now, the last Mishnah, the way that Sefer Yetzirah ends is, I'm going to read the whole thing because it's, in a sense, it's a type of review, but it adds one thing that we've said from the beginning, but it hasn't been explicit to now. So it says like this, Kishaba Avraham Avinu, Alav Shalom. So when Avram came, he beat the Ra'ah. He looked and he saw the Hevin, the Chaker, and he understood and he probed the Chakak, the Chatzav. He engraved and he carved. The Alta, Biado Habriya. He was successful in creation. Now, this could be understood in many, many different ways, but the way You Kaplan understands is that Avram Avinu not only gave over this wisdom that he came to through deep introspection, through visionary sight. He probed, he engraved, he carved, he permuted. In other words, through the Hebrew letters, through the 10 Sfirot, he came to understand, in a sense, God's creative process. As it is written, Shneamar ve'eta nefesh asher asa b'charan. And here it quotes, it says in the book of Genesis, when Avram was commanded by God to leave everything behind and go to Israel, it says he took with him the souls that they had made in Haran. So most people explain these are the souls of the people that began to follow Avram's teaching of monotheism. And so it says, Miyad nigla alav Adon Yaakov. And when Avram had gone through this whole process of searching and exploring and understanding, so it says, Miyad nigla alav Adon Yaakov, that the God of everything revealed himself to him. The Karo Avram Ohavi, and he said, and he called him Avram, the one who loves me. Excuse me, Avram, well, you could read it that way. Avram, my beloved. The Karat Britlo, and he made a covenant with him. Ulazaro Adolam, and with his children forever. And just because of time, we'll have to end there. But this is significant because we've been quoting that by tradition, the wisdom in Sefer Yetzirah begins with Avram Avinu. He was the one who began to give this over. Now remember, between him and Rabbi Akiva is 1,700 years of oral tradition. And so no one claims that Avram wrote this book in exactly these words and in these Mishnahs and these chapters. But the tradition is, and the Gemara speaks about it extensively, that Avram was a world-famous mystic. He was a world-famous astrologer, astronomer. When he wanted to buy a burial plot for Sarah, the people say to him, "We know you're a prince of God in our midst." And another Gemara says that all the king, remember, he came from the east and he began teaching in the east. And it said that all of the kings of the east and the west came to Avram. And so Avram handed down a mystic tradition that became part of the elders and the prophets and the sages, and until this day, all the Kabbalists. And so I'm just thinking, because the manuscript I'm working on right now is all about Avram Avinu. So there's not enough I can say. The subtitle is Insights into the Most Influential Person in All History. That's what I want to present to the world, that Avram Avinu, bar none, is the most important, influential person who ever lived. So bless me, I'll be able, one day you'll be able to, to read it. Bezrat Hashem. Okay, so As I mentioned in the beginning, if anyone came on late, there will not be a discussion tonight because I'm running off to Rav Ginsburg's big Yud Tet B'Kislev event, which we, again, if you go to the beginning of the chats, if you look at your WhatsApp, we sent everyone links to this event. Incredible energy and ruach and singing, and it's more music than teaching, really. Obviously, the teaching will be in Hebrew, though there's a chance that there'll be an instantaneous English translation. I don't know about that, but the music and the energy, it's worth putting on and, coming in and out and just picking up on the incredible energy. So thank you everyone for coming. And we will, next week is Hanukkah. And I am, at least right now, unless you get a different notice, I am planning on teaching. There will be a class next Tuesday as regular. So take care, everyone.